At peace is only possible when all parties choose it. The humans have chosen war, and we are not equipped to fight them. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Galactic Council would comply with human demands. The return of the children happened with unprecedented efficiency. Within 47 hours of Admiral Okafor's ultimatum, every human child held in Council facilities was aboard Terran ships heading home. The evacuation was supervised by human military forces that had appeared at research stations across the galaxy with clockwork precision. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the TDF. Retribution as they approached New Terra colony. Below, she could see the landing platforms where families waited to be reunited with their children. The scene was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Parents who had believed they might never see their children again. Children who had been traumatized by their forced separation. Professor, Captain Santos joined her at the observation window. The children are ready for transport down to the surface. Medical teams report that they're physically healthy, but the psychological evaluations are still ongoing. Elena nodded. How are they handling the reunion process? Better than expected. Human resilience is remarkable, especially in children. They'll recover given time and proper support. Through the window, Elena watched as the first shuttles touched down on New Terra's surface. Parents rushed forward as their children emerged, creating scenes of joy and relief that reminded her why this war had been necessary. Captain, Elena said quietly, was it worth it? Everything we did, everything we revealed about ourselves. Captain Santos was quiet for a long moment. Professor, for 800 years we let the galaxy believe we were harmless. We convinced ourselves that we had evolved beyond our warrior nature. But when they came for our children, we discovered that some things never change. And now the galaxy knows what we really are. The question is whether we can live with that knowledge. 3 months later, Elena found herself back in the Swiss facility that had planned humanity's response to the crisis. But the mood was very different now. The immediate crisis was over, but the long-term consequences were just beginning to unfold. General Harrison looked older than he had at the beginning of the conflict. Dr. Vasquez, thank you for coming. We need your assessment of the post-war galactic situation. Elena took her seat in the briefing room, which now included faces she hadn't seen before, diplomats, economists, and social scientists who were trying to understand what humanity had become. The immediate results are clear, Elena began. The Galactic Council has formally acknowledged human sovereignty over all matters relating to human families and children. Dr. Vexcon and 17 other research directors have been transferred to human custody for trial, and the Council has established new protocols requiring explicit consent from planetary governments before conducting research on sentient species. Those are the official changes, General Harrison said. What about the unofficial ones? Elena pulled up a holographic display showing galactic trade patterns. This is where things get interesting. Human trade relationships have fundamentally shifted. Some species are actively courting closer ties with us, recognizing that we're not the minor power they thought we were. Others are maintaining distance, unsure of how to interact with us now. And militarily, Colonel Santos asked. 17 species have begun military modernization programs clearly in response to our demonstrated capabilities. They're trying to develop countermeasures to human warfare tactics. General Harrison frowned. Should we be concerned about that? Elena shook her head. Not really. They're approaching the problem from a galactic perspective. Formal military doctrine, traditional fleet engagements, rules of warfare. They don't understand that our advantage comes from thinking differently about conflict itself. Explain. The galaxy has been peaceful for so long that they've forgotten the fundamental nature of war. They think it's about technology and numbers. We know it's about psychology and adaptation. They're trying to build better ships. We built better warriors. Dr. Patel joined the conversation from across the room. The psychological impact has been enormous. For 4 millennia, the galaxy has operated on the assumption that all civilized species would choose cooperation over conflict. We've shattered that assumption. Is that good or bad? Elena asked. Both, Dr. Patel replied. On one hand, species are more cautious about imposing their values on others. On the other hand, the peace that the galaxy enjoyed was based on a shared belief in nonviolence. We've introduced a more complex dynamic. Elena looked around the room at the assembled experts. What's our long-term strategy? Do we go back to being the peaceful neighbors we were before? General Harrison was quiet for a long moment. We can't go back, Elena. The galaxy knows what we're capable of now. The question is how we move forward. What do you mean? We've become the galactic police force by default. When the Calarian Collective had border disputes with the Crystalline Assembly last month, they asked us to mediate. When the Trade Federation discovered corruption in their banking system, they requested human investigators. We're not just members of galactic civilization anymore, we're its guardians. Elena felt the weight of that responsibility. Are we prepared for that role? We're preparing, Colonel Santos answered. We're establishing diplomatic corps with military backing, expanding our intelligence capabilities, and developing protocols for intervention in galactic crises. It sounds like we're becoming the very thing the Council used to be, Elena observed. Not quite, Dr. Patel corrected. The Council ruled through bureaucracy and consensus. We're establishing influence through demonstrated capability and clear principles. It's a different kind of leadership. General Harrison activated a new display showing human expansion plans. Elena, we're not just responding to galactic events anymore. We're shaping them. Human colonies are being established in strategic systems. Human trade companies are partnering with species that were previously isolated. Human cultural exchanges are spreading our values throughout the galaxy. Elena studied the expansion patterns. This looks like empire building. It's influence building, General Harrison corrected. We're not conquering anyone. We're offering protection, partnership, and prosperity to species that choose to align with human values. And if they don't choose alignment, then they're free to go their own way, as long as they don't threaten human interests or commit crimes against sentient beings. Elena understood the implications. We've become the ultimate arbiters of galactic morality. Someone has to be, Colonel Santos said simply. The Council proved that bureaucratic consensus can't handle real moral challenges. When they came for our children, they demonstrated that their system was fundamentally flawed. So what happens now? Elena asked. General Harrison smiled for the first time in months. Now we build something better. A galaxy where families are protected, where children are safe, and where justice isn't subject to committee approval. And if other species object to human leadership, they're welcome to challenge us, General Harrison replied. But they should remember why the galaxy has been peaceful for 4,000 years. It wasn't because everyone was naturally peaceful. It was because no one had given them a reason to be otherwise. Elena looked out the window at the stars that now seemed different than they had a year ago. Humanity had spent 8 centuries learning to be peaceful members of galactic civilization. But when pushed too far, they had remembered what they truly were. Are we the good guys in this story? Elena asked. Dr. Patel considered the question carefully. We're parents who got our children back. We're protectors who prevent others from experiencing what we went through. We're teachers who remind the galaxy that some lines should never be crossed. That sounds like the good guys to me, Colonel Santos added. Elena nodded slowly. The human response to the abduction of their children had ended 4,000 years of galactic peace. But perhaps it had begun something better, 4,000 years of galactic justice. The children's war was over, but the age of human leadership had just begun. And across 9,000 worlds, species were learning that sometimes peace required the capacity for war, and that the most dangerous enemies were those who had been friends until someone threatened their children. The galaxy had taken human children for scientific curiosity. In response, humanity had taken the galaxy itself, and perhaps for the first time in 4 millennia, the galaxy was truly safe. The children's war was ending before it had truly begun, and the galaxy's balance of power had shifted forever. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives from 9,000 worlds demanded answers that no one could provide. Admiral Kextal's report from the Sigma-9 incident had shattered every assumption about human military capabilities. Chancellor Vexmore struggled to maintain order as the chamber erupted in panicked voices. Delegates, please. We must approach this crisis systematically. Systematically? Representative Thixara's metallic voice cut through the noise. They destroyed a council battle fleet in 17 seconds. What system addresses that? Admiral Zexthera stood at the military briefing station, her multiple arms manipulating holographic displays that showed the spreading crisis. Honored delegates, we now have confirmation of human military action across 17 star systems. They have liberated every facility holding human children and neutralized all Council forces that attempted to interfere. How many casualties? Asked the representative from the Aquatic Federation. That's the most disturbing part, Admiral Zexithera replied. 0. The chamber fell silent. Representative Yeath of the Calarian Collective leaned forward. 0 casualties? But Admiral Kextal reported that his fleet was destroyed. Disabled, not destroyed, Admiral Zexithera corrected. Every human attack has been precisely calibrated to neutralize threats without causing fatalities. They are deliberately avoiding Council deaths. Chancellor Vexmore's crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. This suggests they still hope for a diplomatic resolution. No, Admiral Zexithera said grimly. This suggests they are demonstrating restraint before the real war begins. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's communication systems activated. The central holographic display showed a human woman in a military uniform that none of them recognized. Greetings, Galactic Council. I am Admiral Rachel Okafor, Supreme Commander of Terran Defense Forces. I am addressing you as a courtesy, not as a supplicant. Chancellor Vexmore activated his speaking device. Admiral Okafor, your forces have committed acts of war against lawful Council operations. We demand immediate cessation of hostilities and surrender for processing. Admiral Okafor's expression didn't change. Chancellor, you kidnapped our children for forced experimentation. Under human law, that constitutes an act of war. We have responded appropriately. Your children were research subjects in a lawfully approved scientific study. Research Director Vexcan interjected from his position in the scientific delegation. Admiral Okafor's eyes focused on the research director with an intensity that made several nearby delegates uncomfortable. Dr. Vexcan, you are a war criminal under human law. When this conflict ends, you will face trial for crimes against humanity. This is preposterous. Dr. Vexcan's scales bristled. Humans are a minor species with minimal technological development. You cannot threaten the Galactic Council. Admiral Okafor smiled. It was the expression of a predator that had stopped pretending to be harmless. Dr. Vexcan, we have been preparing for this conversation for 800 years. Would you like a demonstration of our minimal technological development? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's defensive systems activated. Alarms sounded as automated weapon systems came online and energy shields deployed around the Council chambers. But nothing happened. Your defensive systems are impressive, Admiral Okafor continued calmly. Energy shields, automated weapons, emergency evacuation protocols, all designed by species that have been peaceful for millennia. Chancellor Vexmore looked confused. Our systems detect no threats. That's because our threats aren't where you're looking for them. Admiral Okafor gestured to something off-screen. Every major Council facility, military base, and administrative center in the galaxy is currently targeted by human forces. You cannot detect us because we have been studying your technology for centuries while developing our own. Representative Thixara's voice carried a note of disbelief. You're claiming to have forces throughout the galaxy? Impossible. We would have detected such a massive deployment. Would you? Admiral Okafor pulled up a tactical display. This is the Vorthan Fleet Base at Kepler Station. 16 hours ago, you had 47 ships docked there. You now have 0 functional vessels. The display showed what had been the most heavily defended military installation in Council space. The ships were still there, but they had been methodically disabled. Critical systems had been destroyed, with surgical precision, leaving the vessels intact but completely powerless. And this, Admiral Okafor continued, is the Central Administrative Complex on Proxima 7, your bureaucratic center for 3 sectors. As of 4 hours ago, all computer systems have been compromised. We now have access to all Council records, financial systems, and communication networks. The implications hit the delegates like a physical blow. Admiral Zexthera's compound eyes widened as she understood the scope of what the humans had accomplished. You've been inside our systems for hours, she said. You could have caused massive destruction, collapsed our government, destroyed our infrastructure. Yes, Admiral Okafor agreed. But we are not conquerors, Admiral Zexithara. We are parents seeking the return of our children. Chancellor Vexmore struggled to process the situation. What do you want? Immediate return of all human children held in council facilities. Formal recognition that human families are not subjects for scientific experimentation. And accountability for those responsible for this crisis. The council cannot submit to demands from a single species, Representative Tixara declared. We represent 9,000 worlds and 50 trillion citizens. Admiral Okafor nodded thoughtfully. And we represent one species with 19 billion citizens. Would you like to know how many of your 50 trillion citizens have any military training? She pulled up another display showing demographic analysis. The crystallines are constitutional pacifists. The Aquatic Federation has no concept of warfare. The energy beings consider physical conflict beneath them. Of your 9,000 species, fewer than 20 have retained any military capability, and most of those haven't fought a real war in over a millennium. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed this analysis. Meanwhile, Admiral Okafor continued, every human over the age of 16 has basic military training. Every human colony maintains defense forces. Every human ship can be converted to military use within hours. We may be outnumbered, but we are the only species in this galaxy that remembers how to fight. Representative Yith spoke hesitantly. Admiral, surely you don't intend to fight the entire galaxy. We intend to fight anyone who refuses to return our children, Admiral Okafor replied. If that means fighting the entire galaxy, so be it. Chancellor Vexmore consulted with the senior council members for several minutes. When he returned his attention to the transmission, his crystalline form had dimmed noticeably. Admiral Okafor, the council is prepared to negotiate the return of the human subjects in exchange for your withdrawal from council space and acceptance of appropriate penalties for your illegal actions. Admiral Okafor's expression hardened. Chancellor, you still don't understand the situation. We are not negotiating. We are informing you of our requirements. Return our children, acknowledge your crimes, and hold the responsible parties accountable. These are not negotiating positions. And if we refuse, Dr. Vexkan demanded. Admiral Okafor turned her attention back to the research director. Dr. Vexkan, for 800 years, humans have been model galactic citizens. We followed your laws, contributed to your science, and maintained peace across 17 star systems. Do you know why? Dr. Vexkan remained silent. Because we chose to be peaceful, not because we were incapable of violence, but because we preferred peace. You have now made that choice for us. She gestured to her tactical display, which showed human ships throughout council space. We have 48 hours to complete the evacuation of human children from council facilities. After that, we will begin dismantling any institution that has participated in crimes against humanity. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Admiral Zexthara was the first to speak. They're not bluffing. Everything they've shown us demonstrates capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. But they're still just one species, Representative Tixara protested. Surely the combined forces of the galaxy can overwhelm them. Admiral Zexthara pulled up the military assessment that had been prepared after Admiral Kextal's report. Our wargame simulations suggest otherwise. Human technology is optimized for warfare in ways ours has never been. Their tactics are unlike anything we've encountered, and most critically, they have the psychological capacity for the kind of violence that modern galactic civilization has abandoned. Chancellor Vexmore's light pulsed weakly. Are you suggesting we surrender to their demands? I'm suggesting we seriously consider what happens if we don't, Admiral Zexthara replied. The humans have demonstrated that they can strike anywhere in council space without detection. They can disable our defenses, compromise our systems, and neutralize our forces while avoiding casualties. This restraint will not last forever. What do you recommend? Chancellor Vexmore asked. Admiral Zexthara looked around the chamber at 9,000 species that had forgotten what war meant. I recommend we remember that peace is only possible. The first battle of what historians would later call the Children's War began not with grand fleet engagements, but with the complete disappearance of Research Station Sigma-9. Fleet Admiral Kextal had been monitoring routine communications when the station's transmission simply stopped. No distress signal, no emergency beacon, no final message. One moment Sigma-9 was reporting normal operations, and the next moment it was gone. "Communications, can you raise Sigma-9?" Admiral Kextal asked from the bridge of his flagship, the Galactic Harmony. "Negative, sir. All communication channels are silent. Long-range sensors show nothing. Nothing. The station appears to be intact, sir, but we're receiving no energy signatures. No life signs. No artificial gravity generators. It's as if everyone aboard just stopped." Admiral Kextal had commanded Council peacekeeping forces for 2 centuries. He had handled natural disasters, terrorist incidents, and diplomatic crises. But this was unlike anything in his experience. Set course for Sigma-9 full speed. The journey to the research station took 8 hours. During that time, Admiral Kextal reviewed what he knew about the human situation. The diplomatic crisis over the human children had been escalating, but Council intelligence suggested that human military capabilities were minimal. Their largest ships were cargo vessels. Their most advanced weapons were mining lasers. Even their population was tiny compared to major galactic powers. When the Galactic Harmony dropped out of hyperspace near Sigma-9, Admiral Kextal understood that someone had been very wrong about human capabilities. The research station was intact but completely dark. More importantly, it was surrounded by 12 ships unlike anything in Council databases. They were angular, predatory-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No running lights, no standard navigation beacons, no identifying markers. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're being scanned by unknown energy signatures. The patterns don't match any known technology. Attempt to communicate with the unknown vessels." Before his communications officer could respond, the main screen activated. A human face appeared, middle-aged, scarred, with eyes that reminded Admiral Kextal uncomfortably of ancient predators. "I am Captain Maria Santos of the Terran Defense Force. You are in violation of our operational space. Withdraw immediately." Admiral Kextal activated his translation systems. "Captain Santos, I am Fleet Admiral Kextal of the Galactic Council Navy. You are the ones in violation of Council space. Research Station Sigma-9 is a lawful Council facility." Captain Santos smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Research Station Sigma-9 was a lawful Council facility. As of 6 hours ago, it became a liberated prison camp. We have recovered our children and taken custody of the war criminals who were experimenting on them. War criminals? Captain, this is a scientific research facility conducting lawful studies approved by the Galactic Council. Admiral, let me explain something about human law, Captain Santos replied. Taking children from their families for forced experimentation is a crime against humanity. We don't recognize the authority of any government that commits such crimes. Admiral Kextal felt his confidence wavering. The human ships had appeared without any sensor detection, disabled a major research facility without triggering any alarms, and extracted 84 children without anyone noticing until it was over. This suggested capabilities far beyond anything in Council intelligence reports. Captain Santos, return the research subjects immediately and surrender for processing. Interfering with Council scientific operations is a serious crime. The human's expression hardened. Admiral, you have 30 seconds to withdraw your ships from this system. This is your only warning. Admiral Kextal had commanded fleets for 2 centuries. He had negotiated with pirates, terrorist organizations, and rogue states. No one gave the Galactic Council Navy ultimatums. Captain Santos, you are outnumbered and outgunned. I have a full battle fleet. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated with appropriate mercy. Captain Santos looked at something outside the transmission range, then back at Admiral Kextal. Admiral, you have 15 ships. We have 400. You never saw them because you weren't looking for them. The tactical display on the Galactic Harmony suddenly erupted with new contacts. Ships were materializing throughout the system, not arriving, materializing. They had been there all along, invisible to Council sensors. Impossible, Admiral Kextal whispered. Your technology is designed for peace, Admiral. Ours is designed for war. There's a difference. Captain Santos leaned forward. You now have 10 seconds to withdraw. Admiral Kextal looked at his tactical display. 400 human ships surrounded his fleet. Every one of them was targeting his vessels with weapons that his sensors couldn't even identify. For the first time in his career, He was facing an enemy that was genuinely trying to kill him. All ships, withdraw to safe distance, he ordered. Too late, Captain Santos said. What happened next lasted 17 seconds and revolutionized galactic understanding of warfare. The human ships didn't fire energy beams or launch missiles. Instead, they released clouds of what Admiral Kextal's sensors identified as metallic debris. The debris moved at nearly the speed of light, struck Council ships with kinetic force that overwhelmed their shields, and punched through their hulls like they were made of fabric. The galactic harmony shuddered as thousands of tiny projectiles struck her hull. Damage reports flooded in from across the ship. The humans weren't trying to disable or capture. They were trying to destroy. Return fire, Admiral Kextal ordered. His weapons officers tried to comply, but the human ships were no longer where they had been. They moved like nothing Admiral Kextal had ever seen, random, chaotic patterns that made targeting impossible. Council weapons, designed for precise, humane engagement, couldn't lock onto targets that refused to follow predictable flight paths. Meanwhile, the humans continued their assault, not with the elegant energy weapons favored by galactic civilization, but with crude, devastating kinetic weapons that treated his ships like asteroids to be broken apart. In 17 seconds, Admiral Kextal lost 6 ships and had 9 others severely damaged. His fleet was crippled. Admiral, Captain Santos's voice came across the communications channel again. Your ships are disabled but intact. Your crews are alive but injured. This was a demonstration. Admiral Kextal stared at his tactical display in shock. A demonstration? We could have destroyed your entire fleet in the first 3 seconds. Instead, we chose to show you what human warfare looks like when we're being merciful. The full horror of the situation began to dawn on Admiral Kextal. These weren't the peaceful, cooperative humans who had been model galactic citizens for 8 centuries. These were something else entirely. What do you want? He asked. We want our children back. All of them. From every research facility and council space. We want the people responsible for taking them to face justice. And we want formal acknowledgement that human families are not subjects for your experiments. The council will never agree to those terms. Captain Santos nodded grimly. We assumed they wouldn't. That's why we're not negotiating with the council anymore. What do you mean? Admiral, your fleet was just defeated by a single human patrol squadron. We have 10,000 ships just like these, and we're building more every day. We've identified every council facility, every fleet base, and every administrative center in the galaxy. Admiral Kextal felt his species' equivalent of cold sweat. You're talking about war against the entire galaxy. No, Admiral. We're talking about dismantling a government that thinks our children are laboratory equipment. The galaxy can choose whether that happens peacefully or violently. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kextal staring at his damaged fleet and the hundreds of human ships that continued to surround him. In his 2 centuries of service, he had never seen anything like what had just happened. The humans had fought like no species in galactic history. They had used weapons that ignored established rules of warfare. They had shown tactical innovation that bordered on insanity. Most terrifyingly, they had demonstrated restraint that suggested they were capable of far worse. As his fleet limped back to council space, Admiral Kextal composed his report. The galaxy needed to understand what they were facing. The humans weren't just upset parents seeking the return of their children. They were apex predators who had been masquerading as peaceful neighbors for 8 centuries. And now they were hunting. The children's war had begun, and the galaxy was about to discover why some species should never be underestimated. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire career studying ancient human warfare, a field that most colleagues considered purely academic. For 800 years, humans had been peaceful members of galactic civilization. Military history was just that, history. Until President Hawthorne's Special Commission activated Protocol 7, a classified directive that had been sitting dormant in government archives since humanity first joined the Galactic Council. Professor Vasquez, the young aide, knocked on her office door at the University of New Geneva. The President's office has a priority assignment for you. Elena looked up from her research on pre-spaceflight human conflicts. What kind of assignment? You're being transferred to Project Recall, effective immediately. Transportation is waiting. 6 hours later, Elena found herself in a facility that officially didn't exist, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps. The elevator ride down took 10 minutes, and with each level, she saw more evidence that humanity had been preparing for something that everyone hoped would never come. Dr. Vasquez, welcome to Strategic Command. General Harrison was a man Elena recognized from history books. He had been one of the last human military officers before the peaceful integration. We need your expertise to wake up some very old capabilities. The briefing room was filled with people Elena hadn't seen together in decades. Professor Chen from the Military Engineering Department at MIT. Dr. Patel, who specialized in psychological warfare. Colonel Santos, who had written the definitive text on asymmetric combat before retiring to teach philosophy. Ladies and gentlemen, General Harrison began, for 8 centuries we've been model galactic citizens. We followed council law, contributed to their science, and maintained minimal defensive capabilities. That ends today. A holographic display activated showing star charts Elena didn't recognize. These are Deep Space Survey maps from 300 years ago. What most people don't know is that we never stopped surveying. We just stopped talking about what we found. The display zoomed in on a system that wasn't on any galactic charts. Industrial Complex Omega. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's been producing materials and components for 3 centuries, all under the cover of asteroid mining operations. Elena stared at the hologram. What kind of materials? The kind we hoped we'd never need, Colonel Santos answered. Dr. Vasquez, your research into historical human warfare patterns isn't just academic anymore. We need to remember how humans fight when we fight to win. Over the following weeks, Elena discovered that humanity's peaceful integration into galactic civilization had been carefully orchestrated. On the surface, humans had embraced peace. But deep below the surface, a small group of far-sighted leaders had maintained what they called the insurance policy. Hidden shipyards had been producing vessels using human engineering principles that the Council had never seen. Weapons research had continued under the guise of mining equipment development. Most importantly, genetic archives had preserved the psychological and physiological traits that had made humans such effective warriors, even as the general population evolved toward peaceful cooperation. Show her the prototypes, General Harrison ordered. Elena followed Colonel Santos to a launch bay that stretched for kilometers underground. What she saw defied everything she thought she knew about human space capability. The Council believes human technology is 800 years behind theirs, Colonel Santos explained. They're wrong. We've been on a parallel development path focused on different priorities. The ships look nothing like Council vessels. Where galactic ships were elegant and efficient, these were angular and aggressive. They were smaller than Council battleships, but densely packed with systems Elena didn't recognize. Council ships are designed for peace, with weapons as an afterthought. Dr. Patel joined them. Our ships are designed for war with everything else as an afterthought. But how did you hide this from the Council? Elena asked. They monitor our industrial output. They monitor what we want them to monitor, General Harrison said. Elena, what's the first rule of asymmetric warfare? Elena thought back to her research. Never fight your enemy's war. Make them fight yours. Exactly. The Council expects a civilized conflict with formal declarations, rules of engagement, and diplomatic solutions. They've been peaceful for 4,000 years. They've forgotten what real war looks like. Elena was shown through facilities that had been preparing for this day for centuries. Training grounds where humans practiced combat techniques that had been banned from galactic civilization. Laboratories where psychological warfare specialists studied Council species to identify weaknesses. Command centers where strategists planned campaigns that violated every rule of civilized galactic warfare. This is insane, Elena said after the tour. You're talking about fighting the entire galaxy, are we? Dr. Patel pulled up another display. Let's look at the numbers. The Galactic Council has 9,000 member worlds and approximately 50 trillion citizens. Sounds overwhelming, doesn't it? Elena nodded. But how many of those species have any military capability? How many have fought a war in the last 1,000 years? How many could fight a war if they had to? The display changed, showing species classifications. The crystallines are pacifists by nature. They literally cannot comprehend violence. The Aquatic Federation hasn't had a military for 2 millennia. The hive species work through consensus. They can't make rapid tactical decisions. The energy beings consider physical conflict beneath them. Elena saw where this was going. And the ones who could fight? Maybe a dozen species out of 9,000 have any real military potential. And most of those have been peaceful for so long that their capabilities are theoretical. Colonel Santos smiled grimly. The Council's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They've created a perfectly peaceful civilization by eliminating anyone who might disturb that peace. What they failed to understand is that sometimes peace requires the capacity for war. But they have superior technology, Elena protested. Do they? General Harrison activated another display. Council technology prioritizes efficiency, sustainability, and cooperation. It's designed for a peaceful galaxy. Our technology prioritizes effectiveness, reliability, and victory. It's designed for war. Elena studied the comparison charts. Human ships were indeed smaller and less elegant than Council vessels. But they were also faster, more maneuverable, and carried weapons that the Council had never imagined. Council weapons are designed to disable and capture, Dr. Patel explained. They haven't built anything designed to kill for 2,000 years. Their defensive systems are optimized for natural hazards and accidents, not deliberate attacks. And their military doctrine? Elena asked. Colonel Santos laughed. What military doctrine? They have peacekeeping forces trained in crowd control and rescue operations. They've never fought anyone who was actually trying to kill them. Elena felt a chill as she understood what she was seeing. We're not just talking about a war, we're talking about a slaughter. Only if they refuse to return our children, General Harrison said quietly. Elena, I know this seems extreme, but you've studied human history. What happens when someone threatens our children? Elena knew the answer. Throughout human history, from ancient tribes to modern nations, the response to threats against children had been swift, total, and merciless. It was perhaps the most fundamental human trait, the willingness to commit any violence, pay any price, and destroy any enemy that threatened their offspring. Sir, an aide approached General Harrison with a message tablet. Priority communication from the diplomatic team. General Harrison read the message, his face darkening. The Council has rejected our final ultimatum. They're refusing to return the children. What are your orders, sir? Colonel Santos asked. General Harrison looked around the room at the assembled specialists who had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Activate all sleeper protocols. Bring the industrial complexes online. Begin fleet deployment. He turned to Elena. Doctor, I need you to help our commanders remember how humans fight when we fight to win. The Council thinks they're dealing with their peaceful neighbors who've been following their rules for 8 centuries. Elena understood. They're about to discover they're fighting the species that conquered their own homeworld before they ever reached the stars. Phase 3 is authorized, General Harrison announced. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to remind the galaxy why it was peaceful. Above them, across 17 star systems, hidden facilities began powering up. Ships that had waited centuries for this moment launched from concealed bases. And 800 years of carefully maintained military readiness finally had a purpose. The humans were going to war. The Galactic Council chambers had hosted diplomatic discussions for 4 millennia, but never had the atmosphere been so tense. Representatives from 9,000 worlds watched as Ambassador Marcus Webb walked to the central speaking platform, his footsteps echoing in the vast hall. Chancellor Vexmore, an ancient crystalline whose species had helped found the Council, activated the translation matrix. The human delegation has requested an emergency session to address recent events on the colony world New Terra. Ambassador Webb, you may present your case. Marcus looked up at the tiered seating that rose in concentric circles around him. Thousands of alien faces stared down with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disdain. He had served as humanity's chief diplomat for 20 years, building relationships and trust across the galaxy. Today, all of that meant nothing. Honored delegates, Marcus began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. 3 days ago, Council forces invaded the human colony of New Terra and abducted 84 children. In the process, they killed 17 human civilians who were trying to protect their families. I am here to demand the immediate return of our children and accountability for these deaths. A ripple of whispers swept through the chamber. Chancellor Vexmore's crystalline form pulsed with pale light. Ambassador Webb, the actions on New Terra were conducted under lawful scientific authority protocols. The collection of specimens was approved through proper channels. They are not specimens, Marcus said, his diplomatic training barely keeping his anger in check. They are children. They have names, families, and lives. You cannot simply take them for your experiments. Research Director Vexcan rose from the scientific delegation section. His serpentine body coiled as he prepared to speak. Ambassador, human emotional attachment to offspring creates an irrational response to standard research protocols. The subjects will receive superior care and education at our facilities. This research could benefit all galactic species. Superior care? Marcus pulled out a datapad. Let me tell you about superior care. 8-year-old Tommy Chen has been crying for his mother for 3 days straight. 12-year-old Maria Santos refuses to eat because the food doesn't taste like her grandmother's cooking. 15-year-old David Kim keeps asking when he can go home to help his father with the harvest. The chamber fell silent. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. These children are traumatized, terrified, and separated from everything they've ever known. Is this your definition of superior care? Representative Thixera of the Molten Worlds delegation activated her speaking device. Ambassador Webb, while we sympathize with the emotional nature of this situation, we must consider the greater good. This research could unlock secrets of human creativity and innovation that would benefit trillions of beings. At what cost? Marcus demanded. When did the galaxy decide that our children were acceptable sacrifices for scientific curiosity? Chancellor Vexmore's light pulsed in what humans had learned to recognize as irritation. Ambassador, you speak as if humans are being uniquely targeted. The Council conducts research on all species when scientifically warranted. The Delcari contributed tissue samples that led to cures for 17 galactic diseases. The Xanthari allowed cognitive studies that improved education across 3 sectors. Tissue samples and cognitive studies are not the same as kidnapping children, Marcus shot back. Would any of your species tolerate their offspring being taken for 50 years of experimentation? A new voice spoke from the upper galleries. Admiral Zexathara had not been scheduled to address the council, but her authority as a senior military commander gave her the right to speak. If I may, Chancellor, I believe there is a fundamental misunderstanding here. All eyes turned to the Vorthan Admiral. Marcus had met with her several times during trade negotiations and found her to be more reasonable than most council officials. Most galactic species, Admiral Zexthera continued, reach independence within 1 to 3 years of birth. Our offspring are biological investments that we protect until they can protect themselves. But human children remain dependent for nearly 2 decades. They form emotional bonds that define their entire psychological development. Taking human children is not equivalent to collecting tissue samples. Research Director Vexcan's scales rippled with displeasure. Admiral, with respect, you are not a xenobiologist. These extended dependency periods are precisely what make humans scientifically interesting. The subjects will adapt to their new environment. They are 6-year-olds who want their mothers, Admiral Zexthara said firmly. They are not going to adapt to becoming laboratory specimens. Marcus seized the moment. Admiral Zexathara understands what many of you seem to have forgotten. We are talking about children. Sentient beings with feelings, fears, and the right to grow up with their families. I am formally requesting their immediate return and compensation for the families affected. Chancellor Vexmore consulted with the senior council members for several minutes before responding. Ambassador Webb, after consideration, the council is prepared to offer the following compromise. The research will continue as planned, but human families will be allowed to visit the subjects twice per standard year. Additionally, the subjects will receive enhanced education that will benefit them upon their eventual return to human society. The chamber erupted in what the translation matrix identified as approval from most delegates. They seemed to think this was a generous offer. Marcus stared at the Chancellor in disbelief. You're offering to let parents visit their kidnapped children twice a year for 50 years, and you think this is a compromise? The research must continue, Research Director Vexcan insisted. Too much has been invested in this project to abandon it now. Marcus looked around the chamber one final time. He saw alien faces that showed no understanding, no empathy, and no willingness to recognize that they had crossed a fundamental line. These beings who prided themselves on their peaceful civilization had become so bureaucratic that they could no longer see the horror of what they were doing. Then we have nothing more to discuss, Marcus said quietly. Humanity formally withdraws from all council scientific programs. We will not contribute research, technology, or expertise to any organization that treats our children as experimental subjects. Representative Thixara laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Ambassador, human scientific contributions are minimal compared to the rest of the galaxy. Your withdrawal will hardly be noticed. Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. You might be surprised by what you notice when it's gone. As Marcus left the chamber, he activated his emergency communicator. Priority message to President Hawthorne. Diplomatic solution impossible. Council refuses to return the children. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2. The response came back immediately. Understood. Phase 2 authorized. Come home, Marcus. We have work to do. Across human space, ancient facilities that had been mothballed for 8 centuries suddenly hummed with activity. Deep in the asteroid belts of the Sol system, massive construction projects began. On military bases that had been converted to universities, professors started dusting off old textbooks on subjects that hadn't been taught in generations. The humans were remembering things the galaxy had never seen. In the council chambers, Admiral Zexthara watched the human ambassador leave and felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. She had studied human history during their integration period. She knew what humans had been before they joined galactic civilization. They had been warriors, the most effective, creative, and terrifying warriors the galaxy had ever produced. And for 800 years, the galaxy had enjoyed peace because humans had chosen to put away their weapons. Now the council had given them a reason to pick them up again. She began composing a message to her superiors, recommending immediate defensive preparations. She doubted anyone would listen, but she had to try. The galaxy was about to learn why some sleeping giants should never be awakened. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing supply manifests when the first ships appeared in New Terra's orbit. The sight didn't alarm her initially. Council vessels visited the outer colonies regularly for trade inspections and administrative updates. As the military liaison for New Terra Colony, she maintained friendly relationships with most galactic officials. Captain, her communications officer called from across the command center. We're receiving a priority transmission from the lead council ship. They're requesting immediate cooperation with Scientific Division Collection Protocol 77 Alpha. Sarah frowned. She wasn't familiar with that protocol designation. Put them through. The holographic display activated, showing a tall insectoid creature with multiple compound eyes. Sarah recognized the species as Thrakari, generally peaceful bureaucrats who handled most council scientific operations. Greetings, Captain Chen. I am Research Coordinator HFY. We are here to collect specimens for an approved galactic research project. Your cooperation is required under Council Scientific Authority regulations. Specimens? Sarah's voice sharpened. What kind of specimens? We weren't notified of any biological surveys scheduled for this system. The notification was sent through proper channels 3 standard days ago. HFY replied, consulting a handheld device. We require 147 human juveniles between the ages of 5 and 15 standard years. The subjects have been pre-selected based on genetic diversity requirements. Sarah's blood turned cold. You want our children? Juvenile specimens, yes. They will be transported to Research Station Sigma 9 for a comprehensive developmental study. This research has been approved by the Galactic Council and will contribute significantly to understanding human cognitive development. Absolutely not. Sarah stood up, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. You are not taking our children anywhere. HFY's compound eyes glittered with what might have been confusion.
Captain Chen, this is not a request.
This is a lawful collection order under Council Scientific Authority. Compliance is mandatory. I don't care what authority you think you have. You're not taking our kids. Sarah activated her emergency communication system. This is Captain Chen to all colony security teams. We have a code red situation at the spaceport. Unknown vessels are attempting to abduct colonial children. The Thrakari's head tilted in a way that suggested surprise. Captain, please understand that resistance to Council scientific operations is considered an act of rebellion against galactic law. The subjects will be well cared for and receive excellent education and nutrition. This opportunity will benefit them greatly. They have families here, Sarah said through gritted teeth. They have parents who love them. You can't just take them for your experiments. Emotional attachment is precisely what we need to study, HFY explained patiently. Human offspring remain dependent on parental figures for an unusually long period. This dependency creates psychological patterns that may explain human innovation capabilities. The research could benefit all galactic species. Sarah's communications console erupted with incoming calls. Colony security forces were reporting unusual activity around schools and residential areas. Parents were frantically trying to locate their children. The reality of the situation was becoming clear. This wasn't just a threat, it was already happening. Security Team Alpha to command, came the voice of Sergeant Rodriguez. We have multiple council shuttles attempting to extract children from Central School. They're using some kind of sleep gas. The kids are unconscious but alive. Sarah's vision went red. All units engage immediately. Use whatever force necessary to protect the children. Captain, Ixvar's voice carried a note of concern. Violence against council personnel is a severe violation of galactic law. Your colony could lose its council membership status. I don't give a damn about council membership. Sarah drew her plasma pistol. Get off my planet now. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for centuries. New Terra's colonial security forces, armed with relatively primitive weapons, engaged council collection teams across 17 locations simultaneously. The council forces had expected compliance, not resistance. They were equipped for specimen collection, not combat. The humans fought like creatures possessed. Parents threw themselves at armored council troopers with nothing but fists and farming tools. Teachers barricaded themselves in classrooms with their students. Even children as young as 8 picked up rocks and threw them at the alien soldiers. The council forces had superior technology, but they were utterly unprepared for the sheer ferocity of human protective instincts. What should have been a routine collection operation turned into a chaotic battleground. In the end, the humans lost. Superior numbers and advanced weapons eventually overwhelmed colonial defenses, but not before they had rescued 63 children and inflicted casualties that shocked the council forces. No species had ever resisted a council scientific operation with such violence. As the dust settled, research coordinator Ixvar stood in the smoking ruins of what had been New Terra's primary school. 84 human children had been successfully collected, but the cost had been higher than anticipated. 17 council personnel were injured and 3 were dead. Sir, his aide approached nervously. Should we proceed to the next collection site? Ixvar looked at the human bodies scattered around the playground. Parents who had died trying to protect their offspring. The sight troubled him in ways he didn't understand. Continue with the mission, but request additional security support. The news of New Terra reached Earth within hours. The reaction was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in 4,000 years. Humans didn't file formal complaints or request diplomatic meetings. They didn't petition the Council for justice or appeal to galactic law. They began to prepare for war. President Elizabeth Hawthorne stood before the emergency session of the Terran Assembly, her face carved from stone. My fellow humans, she began, her voice carrying across 17 star systems. Today, the Galactic Council declared war on humanity. They may not have called it war, but when you come for our children, when you tear families apart for your scientific curiosity, when you kill parents trying to protect their babies, that is war. The assembly erupted in agreement. Voices rose in anger and grief. But underneath the chaos was something else, something that had been dormant in humanity for 800 years of peaceful galactic integration. The humans were remembering what they used to be. We gave them peace. President Hawthorne continued as the assembly quieted. For 8 centuries we have been model galactic citizens. We traded fairly, followed their laws, and contributed to their civilization. We forgot our own nature because we thought we had evolved beyond it. She paused, looking out at the representatives of 17 human worlds. They have reminded us who we are, and now they will learn why their galaxy has been peaceful for 4,000 years. It's because they had never met humans before. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was going to war. The Galactic Council had ruled over 9,000 star systems for 4 millennia. Peace was not just a word in their vocabulary. It was their religion, their law, and their greatest achievement. Wars belonged to the ancient past, before the great unification that brought every species under one harmonious government. Admiral Zexthara of the Vorthon Empire adjusted her crystalline uniform as she reviewed the morning reports. The bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Harmony, hummed with the quiet efficiency that had defined galactic civilization for longer than most species had possessed spaceflight. Her 4 eyes scanned the holographic displays showing trade routes, planetary surveys, and the endless bureaucratic dance that kept 9,000 worlds functioning as one. Admiral, her aide, a young Calarian with spotted blue skin, approached with a data tablet. "We have the quarterly reports from the Outer Rim territories." Zexathera accepted the tablet with one of her 6 arms while the others continued operating her command station. The Vorthan had evolved for multitasking, which made them natural administrators. "Any anomalies, Subcommander Yith?" "Nothing significant. The usual minor trade disputes, some environmental restoration projects, and..." Yith paused, his gill slits fluttering nervously. "There is one item. A request from the Hegemony Scientific Division regarding the human homeworld." The Admiral's compound eyes focused more intently. Earth was an interesting case study in galactic politics. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel only 800 years ago, making them relative newcomers to the galactic community. They had been remarkably adaptable, quickly establishing colonies across 17 systems and integrating well with existing trade networks. What made humans truly fascinating was their unusual biology. Unlike most species, human offspring required extraordinarily long periods of development. A human child couldn't survive independently for nearly 2 decades, compared to the few months or years needed by most galactic species. This extended childhood created unique psychological and social structures that xenobiologists found endlessly intriguing. "What does the scientific division want with human children?" Zexathera asked. Yith's gills fluttered again. "They're requesting specimens for a long-term study. Something about understanding the relationship between extended development periods and technological innovation. They believe human creativity might be linked to their unusually long childhood dependency." The Admiral considered this. The Galactic Council's scientific institutions regularly conducted studies on various species. It was how they had developed the medical treatments that allowed different alien biologies to coexist peacefully. The research had always been conducted ethically, with full consent from planetary governments. "Have the humans agreed to this study?" "The request hasn't been sent to Earth yet. The scientific division wants council approval first." Yith handed her another data file. "They're proposing to collect approximately 1,000 specimens from different human colonies. The study would last 50 standard years." Zexathera frowned. 50 years was nothing to a Vorthan, who lived for 3 centuries, but it represented the entire childhood and young adulthood of a human. "That seems excessive. What would happen to these human children during the study period?" "They would be raised in controlled environments on the research station Sigma-9. The division assures that the children would be well cared for and receive optimal education and nutrition. They argue this might actually benefit the subjects, as they would have access to advanced galactic knowledge systems." Something about this proposal troubled the Admiral, though she couldn't identify exactly what. Perhaps it was the casual way the scientist referred to human children as specimens. In her 400 years of service, she had seen the Council's bureaucracy grow increasingly detached from the realities of individual lives. "What is the scientific merit of removing children from their natural environments?" she asked. Yith consulted his tablet. "According to Dr. Vexkin, the lead researcher, humans raised in their traditional family structures develop emotional attachments that might interfere with pure data collection. The controlled environment would eliminate variables and provide cleaner results." Zexathera's stomach chambers churned. She had visited Earth several times during trade negotiations and had observed human families. The intense bonds between human parents and their offspring were unlike anything seen in most species. Human children weren't just biological investments, they were emotional focal points around which entire family structures revolved. "Has anyone consulted with human psychologists about this research design?" The proposal states that human scientists would be too emotionally compromised to provide objective input. Yith's voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Dr. Vexkan believes that human attachment behaviors might be an evolutionary weakness that needs to be studied and potentially corrected." The Admiral set down the tablet harder than necessary. The Council had always prided itself on respecting the diverse evolutionary strategies of its member species. The idea of correcting human behavior seemed to contradict those principles. But she was just one admiral in a vast bureaucracy. The scientific division had its own authority structure, and their research had contributed enormously to galactic medicine and technology. If they believed this study was necessary, who was she to question their expertise? Forward the proposal to the Research Ethics Committee, she decided, but include a recommendation for additional consultation with human behavioral experts. Yith made notes on his tablet. Should I also request an impact assessment for the human colonies? Removing that many children might have social consequences. Good thinking. Yes, include that. Sexithara turned back to her displays, but the conversation had left her uneasy. Something felt wrong about this entire proposal, but she couldn't articulate what. 3 weeks later, the Research Ethics Committee approved the study with minimal modifications. The impact assessment was deemed unnecessary, since humans reproduced quickly enough to replace the subjects. Human behavioral experts were consulted, but their objections were noted and dismissed as species bias. The collection operation was scheduled for the following month. Admiral Sexithara received the final authorization notice on a routine Thursday morning. She stared at the document for several minutes, her multiple arms trembling slightly. In all her years of service, she had never questioned a council decision. But this felt different. This felt like a mistake that couldn't be undone. She thought about filing a formal objection, but the bureaucratic process would take months. By then, the human children would already be gone. Besides, the scientific division assured everyone that the subjects would be treated well. They might even have better lives than they would have had on primitive human colonies. Sexithara approved the operation and tried to forget about it. She would remember this decision for the rest of her very long life.